when you start to have multiple pressures towards cutting costs and maximizing profits by corporations, what they cut are what they perceive to be needless, redundant safety measures. And they are needless and redundant until they are needed and not redundant. And that's what we saw with these trains. You know, they tout the new brakes so they can make longer trains, so they can have fewer staff, and then they never roll out the brakes. But they have fewer staff and they have longer trains. And so it's harder for them to stop. And they have the older brakes, and then these things derail. When you roll back like Trump did, the requirements and the laws that are imposed on truckers in terms of like getting sleep and the size of the trucks, then you're going to get more accidents. It's not going to happen right away. It's just going to be a statistical thing that you start to see larger trends. That's the way this is. Some people get this. Some people want to use this as a, you know, like there's some nefarious thing going on. The nefarious thing that's going on is called capitalism, and it is called shareholder value, and it is called a lack of regulation, and it is called, you know, like corporate lobbying.
And no profit and maintenance.
That's what's going on. Yet you get ding-dongs who, well, let's talk about Tim Pool.
Yeah.
What does it start with? It starts with him doing what? Let's see, Matt, walk us through this.
So this is a bit confusing. We have two clips from Tim Pool. The first is him doing his sort of standard hysterical Tim Pool thing, and I was looking for the full context of that, and then we have another clip of him sort of talking.
Which one comes first?
Let's do the hysterical.
No, but which one comes first in terms of time?
We don't even know. Like we can't find the original posting that Tim Pool clips pulled from this. But yeah, I think both are from yesterday.
They're both from yesterday, so it's interesting. You can see both sides of this in a way.
The milk toast fence sitter per Timba and Toast.
Or County, North Carolina in early December, damaging equipment in what local authorities called a targeted attack that cut off power to more than 45,000 people. So how is it that we are suggesting it is accidental? We have right here direct statements in the press. Extremist groups did attack our power grid. What about the train? Remember when It's Going Down, the far left extremist website, gave instructions on how to derail trains? And now trains are derailing and they're full of chemicals and they're exploding. Yeah, I don't know. Trains derail, man. They really do. So what can be said? Is it a network of terrorists that are attacking our grid? And maybe. But what can you do with this information? Whether or not it's true is not what matters. Though it does play a role. If it's true that there is a network of extremists sabotaging U.S. infrastructure, then, oh boy, I would argue that you should increase the amount of guns in your possession.
All right, let's take this down just for a moment here. First off, like the idea that a website posted a thing on how to derail a train, and then all of a sudden trains derail. First off, you should be aware, again, trains have derailed rather consistently for a long period of time. The existence of a website that says how to derail a train and a train derailment, I'm not even sure that that's correlation. But put that aside for a moment. Whether it's true or not, like Tim sort of says, has some bearing. It doesn't even necessarily follow that if people are in some way sabotaging infrastructure in certain areas around the country, that it makes more sense for you to get guns. I'm not quite clear on how that, like, that gun, what are you going to do? You're going to shoot that chemical in the air? I'm not quite clear on that. But it is also interesting because to the extent that we know anything about those things in print that say that it was extremist groups, to the extent that that is anything other than a speculation, the speculation has been right-wing groups.
Yes. I'm looking at that Time article that he has on the screen right there. Well, this was the Newsweek one. The other one was the Time article, right? There are like multiple mentions in that article that it's right-wing extremism is what
somehow he missed that.
It's just odd that he goes to Antifa and doesn't mention the multiple references to right-wing extremism.
Remember that thing an account that calls me out on bullshit all the time did that one time? Maybe they're responsible for derailing this train. And I have located this, and actually this clip comes after the one we're about to watch, or at least it was uploaded after that. He's wearing the same clothes, so I think it's probably the same recording session. But watch this next one here and how contrary it is to what he was saying.
I think we're losing our collective minds. That's it. I think human beings are just, losing their minds. And I think it's the internet's fault. I think people are talking about the possibility of vinyl chloride leaks and more train derailments because, one, the internet brings the news right to your face. And this is what many of you have heard me refer to as the scaling problem. If you were to, if you go back in time to the advent of the railroad and you told people a train derailed, they say, oh, wow, that's terrible. But that's it. A train derailed. A train derailed. Scale up U.S. railways 100-fold. And tell people you had dozens, more than a dozen so far this year, derail. And it makes sense. I mean, it's actually seemingly less than we saw in the previous years on average. And but you tell them you got a dozen, they're going to say, what's going on with our trains? How come I'm hearing in the news over and over and over again, trains are derailing, we're losing our minds? Look, this story in Ohio.
Can I just say, like,
Sounds like he's losing his mind.
Yeah.
I feel like this drives me a little bit crazy because, like, it's true that this is more natural or more endemic to America than it should be. Like, North Dakota had 2 bomb trains in the span of like 24 months, like 10 years ago, where like one blew up 50 miles close to Minot, one blew up massively 10 miles outside of Fargo. And it was these crude trains, and there was one driver on it, and he had to run away from the thing, and he didn't even know what was on it until it was blowing up behind him. And I would just say, like, the executives that work for Norfolk Southern and stuff like this love Tim saying this is probably Antifa.
That is what he's doing here. He is running cover for corporate greed and malfeasance. And then I mean, if, like we've talked, you've said this before, if Alex Jones, the CIA or the FBI would love for Alex Jones to exist because he if
Alex Jones didn't exist, the CIA would invent him. And
right. It's the same thing in
Tim
this instance here, right?
Thing.
Because look away from corporate greed, cutting corners on regulations and undercutting workers who say we need more safety, more workers to make sure that these trains don't derail and that they're not too long. It's actually Antifa, and then that fits right into his years-long effort to, start a race war. He's been saying it's Antifa for so many years.
There's he's taking 2 tacks on one day, right? These are the 2 tacks that you can take that both protect sort of boss. Protect the boss, right? Like you get to a fork in the road, but there's three routes you can go. One is sabotage by
the left,
radical leftists. Sabotage, and so you should arm yourself. Whether or not that's even true, you should arm yourself just in case it is. And then the other one is you're overblowing this. There really isn't a problem. Now, it's no big deal, man. It's no big deal. It is really just your perspective is skewed because you're aware of these things and you see these images. And look, there's some truth to that dynamic. Many people have written about it. He didn't. What he calls scaling is
the Tim Pool scaling hypothesis.
God, why does he have to brand every thought he has?
That's a guru standard.
But the point is that like that dynamic exists. But there is also something called Occam's razor, which is the reason why we have these safety like accidents. And in some instances, catastrophes, is because of rollbacks in regulation, failure to deploy new regulation, because of cuts to staffing, because corporations are trying to maximize their profit. And the way they do this, and the way they do it all the times, again, is to take the externalities. Those are the costs that are associated with their business that they have now pushed on to society. Society is going to pay the price for that leak. Even if they are compensated through lawsuits and whatnot, nobody's going to get back to whole. And it's not going to cost that freight company the amount that it would have cost them if they had taken preventative steps to make sure that none of those people pay, that people don't get cancer down the road. Okay, you're going to get $1 million because you got cancer. That's great, but I got cancer.
Yeah.
And my kid is not going to have a father, or my wife is not going to have a husband, or my, whatever it is. And the company pushes that cost onto people. And you see this throughout our society. That is the way our society works. Externalities. Continue with this. And he is running cover for it.
Yeah.
In two different ways in the same day.
Yep.
Over and over and over again, trains are derailing. We're losing our minds. Look, this story in Ohio was bad. But I don't know, man. People seemingly need to be enraged, shocked, or scared. And so
he literally,
You just called a race.
he literally said, arm yourself, whether this is true or not. Literally. I don't know if he says it an hour after this or an hour before it.
Yep.
But it's on the same day, on the same topic.
And no costume change.
Same beanie. Same beanie.
Collar.
Same brain. Continue.
I don't know, man. People seemingly need to be enraged, shocked, or scared. And so they turn to anyone who will give them that.
That's you,
And
buddy.
so while I'll talk about this story and say,
right,
hey,
Tim?
man, be careful. I'm seeing way more people saying we've got 2 more chemical spills, and we don't. I mean, maybe. Look, I don't trust the government.
Fence sitter.
But it seems like we just have a couple derailments, a dozen or so.
Yeah, okay.
And it doesn't look like the apocalypse. Some are saying that what's going on in Ohio may be Biden's Katrina. Maybe. Katrina hit New Orleans, like the whole city was ravaged. This, we're talking about a smaller town of 5,000.
Pause it for a second. All right, so now he's also like he's really going to town for his whatever he perceives as bosses. Joe Biden can do nothing in terms of the federal government, in terms of FEMA, unless Mike DeWine, the governor of the state of Ohio, makes a formal request. Otherwise, Joe Biden cannot deploy FEMA there. Mm-hmm. And Mike DeWine is on record saying, I don't see that much of a problem.
Yep.
So the idea that this is like Biden's Katrina is completely whole cloth fiction.
Yeah.
Whole cloth fiction. To the extent that there is any type of responsibility from the federal government, which he will not mention because he doesn't believe in regulation. They failed to reinstitute regulations that Trump rolled back. They failed to go even further and regulate the shit out of these companies and force them to hire more people. He will not say that because he is ideologically against the government doing that. But he will bring up just sort of this vague, nebulous thing. Mm-hmm. This is bad for Biden.
Yeah, think about it this way, Tim. Say there's a train carrying chemicals going down the tracks, like akin to a trolley. And you can divert the train one way, and the corporation will have to pay more for electronic braking systems, but it'll save lives. The other way, you can divert it, and then there will be massive amounts of chemicals spilled into a small town, potentially causing cancer for decades.
But you can blame Antifa.
Yeah, I mean, those are your two options there. Just a thought exercise.
Is there more to this? Yeah, just play a little more.
Talking about the toxic gas plume spreading eastward. So maybe. But that's where we stop.
Maybe we'll get cancer.
It is rough, especially after the election. For some reason, it seems like everyone's brains just exploded. For real. Don't ask me why. I don't know why, but everyone seems to be losing it. I kind of go the other direction.
Yeah. No, I don't think so. I think you go through the losing your brain direction. Oh, incidentally, this guy just put a poll up the other day. Should I retire and should I close down Timcast and retire? And I guess he didn't quite plan on people voting yes. And then he said, I'm going to retire that show and do something else. That's not what should I retire mean. I mean,
yeah.
He could have said like, well, I'm going to close down Timcast and go to bed. Like I said, I shall retire. But wake up in the morning and start it up again.
Can we indulge just a little bit more of this? He goes on a weird tangent here. Go ahead, Brett.
More people try to find controversy and conflict, and that's why I'm another train derailed, more vinyl chloride, and I'm just, where are you getting this? No, I think people are desperate to get clicks, so people are losing their minds. I wonder if this is some big grand experiment on all of our brains. We are but rats in a box being tested upon.
He's on his Andrew Tate shit right now.
Maybe it's just you. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. But it seems like as people lose interest after the midterms, which tends to happen, we end up seeing people lose their minds and then try and fire off that conflict in any direction they can. This one's a big story, and that's why I'm talking about it. And Biden can't be trusted. That's why I'm talking about it. What? I think the Biden administration is lying about the quality of the air, and I told you exactly why. So I got to wonder.
Wait, what?
They're not telling us.
Has he just come around in this exact thing where, like, people need to calm down? It's not the apocalypse. I do, however, think that the administration is lying about the quality of the air, and presumably we're all going to die from it.
It's so incoherent.
But I don't know.
Yeah.
God.
That's what's really going on. They're telling us what they have to tell us what's going on. They'll lie to us to make sure the machine keeps churning along, even if it means you get sacrificed. And I feel that same way about COVID. I feel that same way about basically anything. Any medication.
You're really applying a lot of critical.
Can I just say, like, you're not applying it to DeWine.
Yeah.
Right. DeWine, who's saying, I don't know if I'd drink the water. The quote, I think, from DeWine today or yesterday was, I don't think I'd drink the water, but I'd go home now.
Sorry, he goes on this. I know we're going on this, but he goes on this weird metaphor. I think we just need to try to include here.
They're ultimately looking at this like a numbers game. How many people can get sick? How many people can die? What do we have to do? And perhaps it's a difficult reality of humanity.
Actively calling
that if we do nothing, you see 1 million deaths because of the toxic spread. So you lie, sacrificing a few thousand to save a few 100,000.
Oh, he's getting
what else
to
do you
his
trolley problem.
How else can a situation like this be handled? Well, I think ultimately it comes down to the breakdown of our culture and what Americans are willing to do. And
this is great.
We don't have a cohesive culture anymore. That's what I was saying earlier in the segment.
Pause it for a second. I just want to stop and think about what it means to have a cohesive culture. Now, Tim how old is he?
36.
I can tell you, being not quite twice Tim's age. I guess I'm not even close to twice Tim's age, or at least I like to think I'm not close to twice Tim's age. Tim has not been around where our culture has been cohesive. It's possible that Tim has been exposed to our culture in such a myopic way that he perceived it as cohesive. But I can assure you that since I was 20, when Tim was born, that our culture has certainly not been cohesive over the past 36 years. So I don't know what he's talking about. He could be talking about at a time where, let's say, maybe before I was born, which was, oddly enough, just after the Civil Rights Act was passed in this country. And I can tell you, there was a lot more cohesion to our society. Well, actually, not so much in the 60s, because there was a lot of civil strife going on there. There's a lot of complaints about this war called Vietnam. But prior to that, in the 50s, can we say in the 50s?
We cohered as an apartheid state.
There was social coherence unless you pulled back and saw like a couple of different societies within a society. They were coherent on one side and coherent on the other side. On one side, it was about quotas and who was allowed into higher education, and frankly, like not in K through 12, who was allowed into country clubs and to restaurants and to drinking fountains and to hotels, and then who was not on the other side. And then within that cohesive societies, there was also like a pecking order within those too. Some could have a bank account in their name and others couldn't. Some could have a credit card and others couldn't. Some could be assaulted within their marriage and others couldn't.
And then like a few decades before that, some could vote and some couldn't.
Yes. I mean, so I'm curious where he's going to, where we're not cohesive as a culture or society.
Oh, you will not guess.
No.
Who are willing to run into the flames. When Fukushima faced that disaster, the Fukushima Daiichi power plant, radiation explosion, etc., the elderly lined up and said, "We will sacrifice ourselves for the youth. They need a chance to live. We've lived our lives." So older folks decided to go in and try and deal with the radioactive leakage. Many of them died. I knew an individual. She guided me and Luke Rudkowski into the red zone. She was a bit older, and she said she wasn't worried because she was older, so she's at lower risk. We wore protective suits and masks to try and keep the radioactive particulates out of our bodies. She did not. She went there a lot, and she died of cancer. I got the email. It's sad. This individual probably, she shouldn't have taken the risks. She should have wore the suit, worn the masks, even if she wanted to go in. But I understood what she was saying. Her and her colleague, who guided us through to explain to us what was going on, said, you know, look, we're old, we've lived, we've done our thing, and we're at lower risk anyway, so, you know, we're here to help you. It's kind of
Pause it
crazy.
just one second. I just want to also weigh in on this. There was somewhere between 250 and 500, if I remember correctly, senior citizens who worked in that field who said, you know, we'll go in because the long-term impact of radiation on us, it doesn't have as much time. We will not lose as much time if we are, and certainly they were brave. I'm not taking anything away from them, but I don't know that you can make broad proclamations because there was a group of 250 to 500 people who did this. And yes, she should have worn her protective gear. But it's an interesting analogy because there was, I don't know if he's about to go here, but there was a big attempt on the right to say, we're going to sacrifice our seniors
For COVID. That's what I thought. I mean, it was the lieutenant governor. It was the lieutenant governor of.
And guess what? We did.
I also, this is a bit of, we did. And this is a bit of a side point, but there's a through line with like right-wing conservatives where they fetishize Japanese culture and like this concept of sacrificing oneself that is really, I think, odd and embedded in this.
Yeah, I'll take it seriously when one of them commits seppuku.
Right.
If you want to go ahead, Brett.
Well, he did almost with that poll the other day.
I mean, he did.
It's just that he did not take the sword. He said, should I stick this sword in me? And they voted yes. And then he goes like, okay, and used it to clean.
No, he just put it back. He put it back on his wall.
Well, he used it to clean his teeth. And then said, I stuck it in me.
Yeah.
Wow.
Risk anyway, so, you know, we're here to help you. It's kind of crazy to think about. And then she died. I suppose it puts me and Luke at risk for some kind of complications down the line. We went into the radioactive red zone.
You were wearing
betcha.
protective equipment.
All for the story. Because we thought it was important.
Very heroic of
We
you.
said, you know, we think we'll be safe. We wouldn't go running into there if we thought we were going to die. We were told the radiation levels were bad, mostly on the ground as the particulates settle. Wear the suits. You should be okay. We went in one time. Mostly okay. You know, we got a clean bill of health after that. But, you know, we were willing to pursue this because it was an important story the world needed to know.
Hold on, pause
about.
it for 1 second. Didn't this start off as a story about how great like our society was not cohesive and the Japanese culture is cohesive because
Sam, you're not getting it.
300 old people went in
Tim
and now
Pool.
it's turning out to being like a story about how brave he was?
Right.
Tim Pool is basically one of these sort of elderly veteran volunteers that went into Fukushima, but he's just doing it for our media.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful.
At the point of reclamation in Fukushima, and we did that. I don't know if we have that same degree here in the U.S. anymore. I think too much of what we're seeing now, maybe because of the
you're
internet,
here,
maybe
dude.
because, who knows what, maybe it's always been this way. But too much now is people saying, just give me what's mine and I'm done. And it's really hard to hold things together when that's the reality.
There you go.
Pause it. Do you know how many
Cultural decadence.
millions of dollars this dude makes a year from YouTube? I mean, millions upon millions of dollars. Not just YouTube, whatever his whole,
It's
whole
just
shtick is.
It's wild how unfailingly they'll come down on actually the problems in all of us, not in the executive suite. We just need to do better. I saw a Bitcoin guy saying like, there's a lot of, terrible stuff going on with our infrastructure recently. Here's a thread on what's happening. And it's like, people aren't motivated by the prestige of maintenance jobs anymore. They just want to do like coding. And it's like, no, it's because of the capital not wanting to invest in maintenance.
Right. And the Japanese example too, like that old woman shouldn't have had to do that. Right. I mean, it's like I don't know the specifics of the story, but the social cohesion that he's talking about is just this, I think, vague notion that in Japan, everybody is in it together because they kind of look the same. And so that creates some sort of solidarity between people. But that, I mean, it's just like a way to advocate for a white majority society and a separatist society without looking that racist.
He never really followed up on the cohesion argument. It really just turned into how brave he was for going in there, and he did it for the media. But I have a suggestion for Tim. Take some of your millions of dollars that you earn a year, rent a private jet, fly to Palestine, and do your freaking reporting.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, do the show.
I mean, you're lamenting that somehow social cohesion is lost in this country because relative to what it was in Japan 12 years ago, as evidenced by the fact that you went into a radioactive zone to report on Fukushima. Dude, you're talking about what was lost in you. If that was what social cohesion was, and you're complaining it's lost, it's really just because you're just sitting in your studio making the big bucks. Get on your private jet or go charter one. Honestly, that decision for you would be like me ordering more water for the studio. Fly there with your video camera and go around and interview people and see what the problem was.
Show us the way, Beanie Boy.
Oh, boy.
I mean, he got the email, though. It was so sad.
It was tough to see that lady that, she needed to do it for the segment that I...
She probably should have worn the protective equipment.